So, as some of you did indeed read in the bulletin, today is an anointing of the sick Sunday. And the anointing of the sick is kind of an underrated sacrament. And so I'm always happy to have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about it. Because, for one thing, the sacrament of the anointing of the sick is for everybody. This is not a thing that we have for the dying. Absolutely not. It's for everyone that's in need of physical or spiritual healing. Which means you have every right to request an anointing for reasons of stress, anxiety, heartbreak, depression, or grief. All of those reasons are just as in line with the sacrament of the anointing of the sick as cancer, broken bones, or upcoming surgery. So, practically speaking, I have two things I want you to remember today about the anointing of the sick. The first is that there is no need for you to question whether or not you are worthy of getting an anointing. Like, is my reason good enough? You don't need to worry about that. If you have a reason for wanting an anointing, that's it. You're all set. Step right up. I've never heard someone ask for an anointing for the wrong reason. It doesn't matter if you don't have any very real symptoms. For the record, I've gotten one anointing in my life this last spring for the Spring Assembly of Priests. And when I got that anointing, I was in perfect physical health. So it counts, trust me. The second practical thing I've got for you today is that you don't need to wait until the illness is at its worst to request an anointing. All right? If your mom or your grandma is in the hospital, you don't need to wait until her darkest hour to call a priest. In fact, you shouldn't wait until the last minute to call us, for the simple fact that we might not be available when you need us the most. I mean, we'll do what we can, but it is typical for people to wait several hours for me to get to the hospital, if not the next morning altogether. So please, if there might be the need for an anointing, call up the office, we'll make an appointment, we'll realistically come the next day, and you can know that the grace of that anointing stays for the entire hospital stay or wherever they are. I know that it's cool and dramatic to have a priest there at the bedside, during someone's final hours. But it's a gamble about whether or not we can be there at all. It's kind of like allergy medication. You don't take allergy medicine when you're choking and you're turning blue. You take allergy medication when you start to realize that you're having trouble breathing. All right? You act earlier to make things easier later. So it is with an anointing. So that said, those two practical things, I want to take the theme of anointing of the sick in a different direction for the rest of my time today. Because last week for Sunday Mass, we heard Christina use one of the most popular phrases of Pope Francis. She reminded us that Pope Francis says that the church is a field hospital for the world. I don't know, maybe it's the fact that I just heard it more than once. I couldn't get that phrase out of my head. I was thinking about that all week. The church is a field hospital for the world. Is that true? If it's true, how so? And I did conclude, well, yeah, it's true. I like the analogy. I had one problem with that train of thought. If the church is a field hospital for the world, doesn't that mean that only sick people would come to church? Mind you, I'm not terribly bothered by that idea, but it's not true. People come to church in good times and in bad. So why is that? What does that mean when healthy people come to church if it's a hospital? And after thinking about it for a little while longer, I realized a basic fact. If you go to a field hospital, you don't just see sick people. you see doctors and nurses as well. All right, you see doctors around doing specialized tasks. They are doing actions that basically only they can perform. And nurses are around that are doing all of the little, they're tending to the comforts and cares of their patients. All the little tasks that keep them alive and keep the healing process moving forward. And sometimes that process is very boring. Other times it is anything but boring. So, when I'm anointing the sick, I'm being a doctor in the field hospital of the church of the world. I am performing an action that not everyone can do. And all of you, when you're performing basic acts of kindness and charity, you are being nurses in the field hospital of the world. Because all of those little charitable acts, they might not seem very important, and indeed, maybe they aren't all that important if you look at them one by one. But if you take them as parts of a whole, the net result is significant indeed. Those actions are like spiritual CPR. You're keeping a person alive for 5 more minutes until they get the medicine or the help or the surgery they need to fully recover and get back on their feet. It's a big deal. Likewise, if I can flip that image around, when I'm saying daily Mass, or more appropriately, when I'm saying my Liturgy of the Hours, when I'm saying my prayers, I pray 5 times a day, I'm being a nurse in the field hospital of the church. Because what I'm doing, it's not particularly earth-shattering, but those prayers bestow grace upon the world like a single candle in a dark room. All right? Because if you've got a candle in a room with other light, well, it's meaningless. I mean, it's mood lighting. It's not illumination, it's decoration. But have you ever been in a pitch black, dark room and then lit a candle? Only then do we remember that it gives off way more light than we ever give it credit for. And like that one candle in a dark room, a little bit of grace goes a long way when it's needed the most. And finally, all of you, in your own way, are doctors in the field hospital of the world when you're in your own element. Now, mind you, I don't know what all of your elements are. I can make a few guesses for a few of you, I think. But you all have your specialized tasks, your good acts that basically no one else can do. And every so often, you are the only thing standing between a person and a spiritual disease that will cripple them for life, like polio. I wrote that, and I couldn't help but think back on my long, long life. And I realized that of all the spiritual doctors in my life, none of them were priests. In fact, with the exception of my dad, none of them were men. In the field hospital of my life, all the great spiritual doctors happened to be women that helped keep my spirit alive when I lacked the strength to do it myself. So, the next time you hear that phrase, the church is a field hospital for the world, I want you to remember that Pope Francis is not talking about all of you as if you're nothing but a group of patients. Indeed, he's talking about all of you as doctors and nurses for all the hurting souls that the world brings to our doorstep. And those duties of ours will continue right on the other side of those doors.